So, Werewolves is just your run-of-the-mill dystopian supernatural action flick, which sort of bases the concept of werewolves with a zombie apocalypse setting in a pandemic-inspired chaos, served with a pinch of the Purge. Sure, it's not groundbreaking by any stretch, but it definitely is a lean, fast-paced way to kill some time. At the heart of it is Frank Grillo, playing a muscle-bound bruiser named Wesley Marshall, who happens to be a molecular biologist somehow. Grillo's knack for elevating B-movie pulp makes the whole thing more entertaining. I mean, I just think of a Charles Bronson with a brain. Plus, for a classic B-grade horror, the plot is refreshingly straightforward, with a shaky mix of over-the-top acting, and the overall result may not have been groundbreaking. But the film is still sort of fun, and it does what it sets out to do, creating an interesting supernatural horror that keeps tensions high. Simple, efficient, and just bonkers enough to keep you watching. Let's discuss what Werewolves is all about. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you, let's begin. How did the werewolves in this dystopian horror come into existence? So the film opens with a leading scientist named Dr. Oranda talking about how a year ago a supermoon caused a global catastrophe. In an interview, he explains that a supermoon happens when the full moon is at its closest point to Earth, which is a natural event that can occur several times a year. But last year's supermoon was anything but ordinary, because over 1 billion people were affected by the moonlight, which violently transformed them into bloodthirsty werewolves. While the nightmare only lasted until dawn, the destruction it left behind was permanent, and now with another supermoon on the horizon, scientists are preparing to test a potential cure. With this year's supermoon approaching in the next few days, Dr. Oranda is urging everyone to take precautions and avoid exposure to moonlight at all costs. But despite the chaos, he reassures the public that scientists are working tirelessly to find a cure for the transformations. Until then, caution is the best defense, so citizens have to stay indoors, avoid the moonlight, and wait it out. But for Wesley, the stakes couldn't be higher, as he lost his brother Sean in last year's disaster, and now he's determined to keep his sister-in-law Lucy and her young daughter Emma safe. Now, Wesley has gone all out to protect them. He's installed an electric fence, set multiple traps, and fully secured the house with all sorts of weapons. As the supermoon night looms, to lighten the mood, their neighbor Regan stops by with a cake to cheer up Emma. Meanwhile, another neighbor, Cody, is busy in his backyard, loudly practicing with his rifle. Cody apparently fancies himself a wolf killer, and seems more than ready for the chaos to come. But the noise of the rifle draws Wesley over, and he asks Cody to tone it down, reminding him that there are kids in the neighborhood. But Cody isn't interested in being a good neighbor, as it will be every man for himself once the moon's out. But Wesley has more pressing issues to deal with, as he's the leader of the Global Rapid Response Team, and is also responsible for overseeing the critical cure experiment. This means he won't be able to stay with his family when the supermoon rises, which will undoubtedly be a tense, high-stakes night where survival would hang in the balance. Could Dr. Oranda find a cure? Once Wesley shows up at the facility for his duty, Dr. Oranda addresses the press, explaining that his team has a critical 9-hour window during the supermoon night to assess the situation, conduct tests, and report their findings. He then introduces Wesley Marshall as the global response leader and lead molecular biologist in the experiment. Next in command is Evan Radcliffe, and rounding out the team is Amy Chen, the chief canis lupus biologist and behavioral specialist. Apparently, the supermoon causes a rapid DNA mutation in those exposed to its light, and the mutation is triggered by moonlight. So this year, the scientists are testing a potential breakthrough with a substance called moonscreen, which they hope will create a protective barrier between the moonlight and the DNA, thus preventing the transformation. So, if this experiment is successful, it could be a crucial step toward finding a cure for this unforeseen disease. Now, 4 volunteers who had transformed into werewolves the previous year had agreed to participate in the experiment. The plan was fairly simple: apply the moonscreen to the subjects and expose them to moonlight to see if it prevented their transformation into a werewolf. But Dr. Chen's husband Miles had turned into a werewolf during last year's supermoon, and this year he's volunteered to be one of the test subjects for moonscreen. Before entering the test area, Miles had a quiet moment with Amy, reminding her that he had volunteered for the experiment and told her not to feel guilty if things didn't go as planned. Following this, with only 30 minutes left before the canopy retracts, Evan is feeling the tension, and sensing his nerves, Wesley reminds him that they've trained for this moment, and together they head out to oversee the test. Soon the experiment begins, with the subject sprayed with moonscreen and then exposed to the moonlight. To everyone's relief, the moonscreen worked. The subjects didn't transform, and for the first time, it seemed like there might be a real way to control the global crisis. This is when Dr. Dr. Oranda asks Amy to get comparative tissue and blood reports from the test subjects for further analysis. Meanwhile, Regan is unaware of the chaos brewing and is searching for her mother inside the house. But what she doesn't know is that a werewolf is lurking in the kitchen. Back in the lab, Wesley examines the tissue samples under the microscope and notices something unsettling as the cells are colliding in a way that seems like an immunological defense system. But just as he's processing this, the subjects begin to transform into werewolves, and before the team could spray any more moonscreen on them, it's already too late. After their full transformation, the werewolves had become incredibly powerful and tore through their cages, before attacking the scientists and everyone in the facility. In the rush, Evan gets mauled by one of the werewolves, and Wesley rushes him to Amy, but then they get cornered by more werewolves. Luckily, they manage to lock themselves in a safe room, but even then, both Wesley and Amy fail to save Evan. Still, they knew their chances of surviving there were slim, and their only option was to escape, so they quickly sprayed themselves with the moonscreen, and knowing it would only protect them for an hour, they packed more for the road. Now, Wesley and Amy had to get out and make it home before the formula wore off, so they reached the parking lot, got into the car, and started driving. But on the way, Wesley received a call from a frantic Lucy, who told him that werewolves were all over the neighborhood, and their neighbor Regan had come to her house begging for help. Wesley then begged Lucy not to open the door, and through her surveillance camera, Lucy witnessed Regan brutally being attacked by a werewolf. On the other hand, Lucy's scream distracted Wesley and they got into an accident by crashing into a bus. Although they survived, their escape was far from over, as they now had to make the rest of the journey home on foot. Do Wesley and Amy make it home? So Lucy's next door neighbor Cody had also transformed into a werewolf and was the one who had attacked Regan. He was acting a bit arrogant and shot a werewolf, which prompted the beast to break into Cody's house, exposing him to the moon. Cody was also the wolf who ripped Regan apart into bits while Lucy watched everything happen from inside through the CCTV cameras. But Cody was not done after killing Regan. He then started breaking into Lucy's house, and to protect herself, Lucy sprayed some sort of wolf-repelling liquid on Cody, hoping it would keep him at bay. But instead, her actions only provoked him further. So Cody, along with his pack, began trying to figure out a way to breach the electric fence surrounding the property. Meanwhile, Wesley and Amy were racing against time to make it home before the moonscreen wore off. However, the streets were eerily empty, with werewolves freely roaming around. In a desperate need to escape, Wesley and Amy decided to take a detour through a passage that led to a tunnel connecting the entire city, hoping it would be their way out of the chaos. But as Wesley and Amy made their way through the underground passage, they stumbled upon a secret cult that had been living there. At first, the cult members refused to let them pass, but after Wesley and Amy explained their dire situation, the cult leader reluctantly agreed to show them the way to the tunnel. Sure, the whole underground cult encounter felt a bit random and unnecessary, but with no other options, they followed the leader's directions. Now, as they made their way through the tunnels, Amy and Wesley reached the gate, only for a werewolf to appear out of nowhere. After a fierce struggle, they managed to kill the beast, but the danger wasn't over. They continued on and found their way to a bodega, where they planned to administer moonscreen, as the 1 hour mark was almost up. However, the temperature inside was too high for the liquid to be effective, so they put the moonscreen in the refrigerator to cool it down, knowing they would have to wait before they could use it again. When the moonscreen was finally ready, Amy and Wesley prepared to apply it, but then a child who had turned into a werewolf was lurking around the bodega, chomping on a cat. This scene had completely shocked Wesley, who could not bring himself to kill the rabid child, so Amy had no choice but to use a taser on the creature, bringing it down. Meanwhile, back at Lucy's house, Cody and his pack of werewolves were closing in. Lucy, desperate to protect herself and Emma, shot at the roof where she heard the werewolves moving, and one of them knocked down a tree, which crashed onto the roof, taking out the power lines in the process. Without any other option, Lucy and Emma then switched on the emergency lights, hoping it would give them some semblance of safety. On the other hand, after reapplying the moonscreen, Wesley and Amy set out again, but their paths soon crossed a militia group that had taken matters into their own hands in order to keep the werewolves at bay. When Wesley and Amy tried to explain their situation, the militia wasn't about to trust them, and things took a much more dangerous turn when a new pack of werewolves began attacking the group. With no time to waste, Amy decided to draw the werewolves away from the militia, giving Wesley a chance to take them out all at once. The plan mostly worked, and Wesley was able to take down several of the creatures. He even managed to get into a car, and Amy was about to follow, when suddenly, a werewolf grabbed her and dragged her away. Wesley desperately wanted to go after her, but he knew it was already a lost cause, so he had no choice but to drive back home to Lucy, hoping things hadn't gotten worse on that front. But when he arrived, he realized the situation was far more critical than he could have imagined. How does Werewolves end? So Cody and his pack of werewolves are going full-on rabid to get to Lucy and Emma, but she was determined to protect Emma, even if it meant risking her own life. Lucy had promised Sean before he passed away that she would always be brave and hold the fort down no matter what, but unfortunately, Lucy missed her shot, and moonlight started pouring in through the holes in the roof. As the werewolves began to stir, Wesley arrived just in time to ram his car into the creatures outside the house, managing to wound Cody in the process. Meanwhile, Lucy ran out of ammunition, so she tackled a werewolf and took it down with an axe. With an immediate threat neutralized, they thought that they were in the clear because daylight was just 15 minutes away, and they knew that once the sun rose, the werewolves would return to human form. But this relief was short-lived, as they heard Cody scream from outside. Realizing the fight was far from over, now Wesley had always despised Cody, and rather than just putting him down from a distance, he decided it was time to face his neighbor head-on. So the need for a final showdown was clear. During Werewolves ending, Wesley exposed himself to moonlight and turned into a werewolf to fight Cody. The fight was brief, and it ended with Wesley holding Cody's head as a trophy, but this win came at a cost. After he had turned into a werewolf, Wesley couldn't control his thirst for blood and made his way to the house. Now, Lucy couldn't bring herself to believe that Wesley could be a threat to them, so she tried to reach the person beneath the beastly transformation, pleading with him to remember his brother Sean and his niece Emma. She reminded him of how deeply he loved his family, hoping it would stop him in his tracks. Furthermore, Lucy shows pictures of Wesley's family to him to bring out the human inside the beast, but despite her words, the werewolf continued to advance. Luckily, the timer goes off, so Lucy picks up a fallen bullet and fires at the roof so the sun ray can fall on Wesley, and as soon as the sunlight touches the werewolf, Wesley becomes a human again. How is the beast in this film different from any other werewolf? So the werewolves in Werewolves are cheesy, but in a fun way. Like, they're trying very hard to be intimidating, but somehow they come off as a little old-fashioned or even dated. There's something about them that's knowingly over the top, almost like they're leaning into their own campiness. While many people today have a kind of nostalgic affection for practical effects, there was a time when those very same effects felt as cutting edge as the latest digital technology. But while watching this movie, you can't help but wonder if the visual effects are actually taking a step backward, because the animatronics in Werewolves look similar to those in the 1991 to 1994 show Dinosaurs. But the only difference is that now the entities have fur and are made to scare rather than make you laugh. Although the werewolves themselves are tall and athletic looking, with devilish ears and animatronic snouts that snap like tiny crocodile jaws, they also move quickly and tear into the victims with gusto, but their character design gives off a vibe that's more DIY horror than state-of-the-art monster making, as they're a bit like papier-mâché creations with clumsily attached fur. From certain angles, they almost resemble the wolf from a Little Red Riding Hood remake done by the team behind Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, which was low budget but strangely entertaining. Plus, there are many loopholes about the beasts in the film. For example, the werewolves here somehow felt like a strong reflection of who they used to be as humans, but without any form of humanity in them. These beasts also had the ability to think, or the intellect to form plans, or else how would Cody know to splash his face with water after Lucy sprayed him with the wolf-repelling liquid? Plus, he even directed the pack to attack by spreading out around the house so nobody could escape. Although there's this whole supermoon ambiguity here, which is even causing kids to turn into bloodthirsty werewolves upon exposure, because in other films, werewolves usually transform by getting scratched by other werewolves or carrying the werewolf gene in the family for generations. Most importantly, in almost every famous werewolf movie, a person can only turn after they reach 18 years of age. But I guess in Werewolves, it's the supermoon that runs the show. Overall, the film wasn't bad, but still, it's just a one-time watch. What did you guys think about it? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.